Hi, it's Paul Brown here from Wealth 21. We're approaching the middle of May, and we've been dealing with the pandemic now for several months, so I've put together a presentation just updating how we're going with containing the pandemic both within Australia and then looking at it globally, and then I'll look at the economy and the markets as well. So let's go to the charts. So the first point to make is that any information in here is just general information based on facts. It's not specifically relating to your situation. If you've got any questions or concerns with your own personal financial situation or your investments, it's always important to seek advice from either us or a qualified financial advisor before making any decisions. So firstly, let's just have a look at Australia and how we've managed to flatten the curve, as they say. So this chart here shows the daily cases in Australia, starting from, we've got to remember that the correction actually started back here in February, but the new cases really started to rise rapidly. This point here was, these pink lines was when Australia started to implement the lockdown measures, around the 20th of March. And then then there was different measures implemented after that, and our daily cases did rise very rapidly. But then with the measures taking effect, we were able to flatten the curve, and now we're at a point, in late April where the states are starting to ease some of those lockdown measures, but still. This is partly related to the outbreak in Victoria, but the number of new cases on a daily basis is actually very much contained. Looking at the world though, so this compares a number of other countries. Australia is down here with Korea, Japan, in terms of, this is cases per million of population. So it does provide a relative comparison, but the nations that haven't done so well are of course the ones that we hear about in mainstream media: Spain and the United States, and the UK approaching in terms of numbers. I believe that the UK is now second to the US in the terms of the total number of cases. And one of the other interesting things to look at is Singapore, which controlled the outbreak or the virus in the early days, but then had quite a significant second wave, I guess, at that point, and their number of cases per million has risen very sharply. So looking at this chart from Shane Oliver shows the red line is China. Okay, the black line is the Eurozone. So including countries like Italy and Spain and the UK, of course, and that curve has come down in terms of the number of new cases. The blue is US, and you could say that while it's been a very discoordinated effort in the United States. They've managed to flatten that curve at least. This green line here is the rest of the world, though. So including some of the emerging nations like Brazil and so on. So that just gives a comparison, in terms of the new cases. Moving on to the economy, this is the US unemployment rate. So this red line here, now this chart goes back to the 1929, the Great Depression, and unemployment rate, of course, during the Depression was very high. So we've had this very steep rise, and the unemployment rate in the US now, or the headline rate, is a little under 15%. This black dot here is interesting though, because that includes the number of people who want a job but they're not in the workforce, or they're employed but they're not at work, so they may be temporarily laid off. And that's sort of between 20-25% of the population. So stunning figures really out of the US. This is the US GDP rate, and their GDP growth rate in the first quarter of 2020 was, I think, negative 4.8%. They're doing everything they can to stop this happening, but the forecast is that growth rate in the second quarter could be less than 15%. This is from Trading Economics, and then a couple of negative quarters following that. So turning now to Australia, we don't have our first quarter GDP figures yet, but the second quarter we're looking at like a negative 8 is the forecast for the Australia, and then like if the virus is contained, we could move back into positive territory in 2021. So next is the Australian share market, and this goes over about 6 months or so, and we saw this very steep decline from about the 20th of February down to for about a month. Very, very rapid decline, of course, and then we saw this green line shows a recovery, and then over the past few weeks, I guess we've been sort of between this 5.2 and 5.6 level on the ASX 200. Okay, looking next at the VIX. The VIX did, of course, spike in the I guess at the heat of the crisis. Volatility, which is a measure of fear in the markets, I guess, has reduced of recent times. So the oil price, this is the NYMEX crude price, used to be around $60. With the massive drop in demand, of course, that has started in February. And then we had this really, yes, that is a negative number. So we had this really, highly unusual situation where literally there was no storage. So the producers of oil were actually paying people to take their oil because it's very difficult to slow down production, and we had such a rapid reduction in demand that literally too much oil was being produced to meet demand. So the oil price now is around $25, although I believe last night it did have a steep fall again. So it remains to be seen whether it can, over the next year or two, get back to this $60 a barrel level. And this is the 10-year bond rate, and we've been watching this over the last couple of months. It's currently just a bit of, this is sort of like the risk-free rate, so it's a bit below 1% at the moment, and it's sort of between this range of 0.85% and 1%. So, we did see this almost a liquidity crunch here, but the Reserve Bank has stepped into the markets in Australia to buy government bonds and try and provide stability to that market and keep rates low so that banks can lend money to businesses who really need it. And just finally, these are our contact details. We're still open. We're preferring, obviously, to liaise with people over the phone or via Zoom at this stage. So any help you need, please feel free to give us a call. So there we have an update. As I say, if there's any questions you have, please feel free to give us a call. We're more than happy to help. And so thank you for listening, and look forward to catching up with you soon.